main product is the Firefox web browser that normally doesn't come pre-installed on our devices. Mitchell Baker, thanks for your time. Really good to see you. And let's start with a question on what we've been talking about on this week's show, China. And one of Mozilla's biggest goals and founding principles is to try and make the internet a global resource, open and accessible to all. So, Mitchell, how can you do that for China when the internet is so heavily censored there?
Yes, it's a real challenge. There's actually many things about the internet that make it a global public resource. And some of those are censorship that we see at the human experience level, and others of those are in the internet and technology and how things work. I'm actually going to the UN next week to discuss these very topics. And at the consumer experience side, their vision of how online life works is very clear, and it is in service of stability of the society and the state.
As many economies, including China, look increasingly to service industries for economic growth, Mitchell, how important is a free and fair internet to that? And what do you think that contributes to economic growth?
That is such an important question, because the free and open internet is what allows competition and what allows new things to develop. And so you need a free and open internet to be able to reach consumers, level playing field, to be able to offer the business you want, and to be able to compete without having to start having products all up and down the stack the way the giants already do.
Let's talk about your competition and, of course, money. How do you, Mitchell, how do you take on the likes of Apple, which is sitting on a cash pile of some $162 billion, Google's parent, Alphabet, it's got about $118 billion in hand. I mean, that's a hard battle, isn't it?
Yes, it's a very hard battle. Competing with the giants in any technology is tough, as we live that difficulty every day. And so I think the idea of a head-on challenge to one of the giants in exactly the design space they're working in, is a long time coming. Now, open source has done that on numerous occasions, but it does take time, and it does take some changes in the environment. At Mozilla, we've always believed that technology or the internet should not be immune from regulation, because that is how citizens and societies exercise their vision of life into the business world. I think one reason why Mozilla's nonprofit status is so important is because we make decisions that, an investor might choose not to, kind of to push the internet closer towards the balance that society wants.
Since you launched Firefox back in 2004, Mitchell, you've seen your share of the internet browser market plummet from a peak of around 30% to around now about 3%. Does there become a point at which it's just not worth the cost of trying to compete with the big guns?
We compete in the browser for a few different reasons, though. It might seem like we love the browser because we've always built it. That's probably true. But underneath that, the browser is an odd piece of software. The only protection you have is whatever protection the operating system gives you, which at a general level can provide some security. And we view Firefox as representing you. And that's what we do with the browser. Everything from protecting you to allowing you to change simple things like websites and fonts to much deeper things that consumers don't experience directly. So we compete because that question of who represents the individual in a highly centralized technological society is critical.
Your foundation's biggest source of cash is that $500 million a year that Google pays to be the default search engine on Firefox. And at the moment, Google's on trial in the US, where the US Justice Department accuses it of unfairly shutting out rivals from the position of being the highly profitable default search engine on web browsers. How concerned, Mitchell, are you about the foundation's future, given that trial could lead to the loss of that money from Google?
There are many reasons to work on revenue diversification, and we've been doing that for some time. And so if there is some catastrophic change, whether it's the one you raised or something else in the future, then we'll address it. But the long-term piece of how is it that the internet's impact on society is a more positive benefit for society than it is today, we'll continue with that, even if the form of work changes.
Mitchell Baker, the big boss of Mozilla, thanks very much for coming on the show, and we'll check in with you soon.
It's my pleasure.
Well, that's it for this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Don't forget